There is another kind of loop that we can use in JavaScript, a for loop. This is a really handy loop to use, say, when the condition of the loop is just the number of times it's run. They look a bit like this. So we write for, then 3 bits of code inside brackets, separated by semicolons. The first bit of code, this yellow bit, is a bit of code that will set up the loop. That will happen first, it just runs once at the start of the loop. Then we check whether this condition is true, this green bit here. If it is true, then we run the code inside these curly brackets here. After this code is run, then we run this red bit of code here, something that tells the loop how to continue or something that changes something in the loop. That will make more sense when we go through an example, but this runs after we run this code in the brackets, curly brackets. Then after this red bit runs, then we check this condition again. If it's true, then we run this code again, then we go back to this red bit, then we check the condition again, and we go run this code again, and we just keep looping through all these things until this condition is no longer true. So once this is false, then we will not run any more code and just keep going with the code underneath our for loop. So all these bits repeat except for this yellow bit here. This bit just runs once at the start. Alright, so let's put that into practice and make all these little bits of code make a bit more sense. So to do this, we can quite easily map the kind of while loops that we were writing just a moment ago to a for loop. So let's look at this example here. We have a while loop that sets I equal to 0, then while I is less than 5, we will print out what I is and then add 1 to I. So let's write that as a for loop. Let's write for, then in brackets, we need to have a setting up. So what will be our yellow bit of code here? So in our while loop, the setting up part is this I equals 0 here. We're setting I to be 0, and that will establish the counter that we're using to do our loop with. So that's what we want to do in our for loop too. So let's write I equals 0 as our setting up line of code, and then a semicolon. Now, after the semicolon, we need to put a condition in. So what will be our condition for the loop to run? It's just the same as our while loop here, while I is less than 5. Same deal for our for loop, we want to run as long as I is less than 5 as well. So let's put that as our condition here. So same condition, so we have our setting up, our condition, let's put that into our for loop in the brackets, then another semicolon. Now we want to write this red bit of code here. So this red bit of code, this how to continue, is what's going to tell the loop to change something or do something after every time we've looped. In order to change, that will change something that will probably trigger the condition to be false or true at some point. So in our while loop, this bit of code is our I++. So just remembering what this ++ does, this is a JavaScript shortcut for adding 1 to something. So this is I equals I plus 1, I++, incrementing I by 1, and that is our how to continue. So just adding in my curly brackets here. So we start by setting I equals 0, just like this while loop. Then we will run some code inside these curly brackets. If the condition is true, this condition here, I is less than 5, and then once we've run this code in the curly brackets, then we will add I to 1, and then check again whether I is still less than 5, and we can just add the same bit of code in the brackets, I. So if we run this now, we should get the same output from both the loops. Yeah, so we get 0 to 4 and 0 to 4. Yeah, so we're just printing I as long as it's less than 5. Cool. So how about we try another example and use a for loop to count backwards from 10. Okay, so let's write another for loop that will count backwards from 10. Let's set up the basic bones of our for loop. Cool. Alright, now first thing we need to do is do our setting up bit of code. What will be our setting up? So unlike in the previous example where we were counting from 0 to something less than 5, we're counting backwards this time. So the setting up doesn't always have to be starting from 0. If we're counting backwards, it might make more sense to start by setting up a variable to be 10, so that then we can count backwards from it. So let's do that. Let's set I equal to 10 this time, and then we'll count down from there. using our for loop. Alright, now our condition. So when do we want to stop counting? So if we're starting from 10 and we're counting down, a good place to start would be, let's stop at 0. So let's say we want to continue our loop of printing. We're just going to print console.log I, which will be the number 10 to whatever number we stop at, which will be 0. So let's continue looping as long as I is greater than or equal to 0. So we're only going to print this as long as I is greater than or equal to 0. And now all we have to do is add in the thing that will actually do the counting down. So at the moment we're just starting from 10, printing to I, which is going to be 10, and then because 10 is greater than 0, so that condition is true. But we're not really doing anything to I at the moment, so currently this is just going to keep looping forever because 10 is always just going to be greater than 0. So let's add a I minus minus. So just like the plus plus, minus minus is a shortcut for subtracting 1 from I. So now we have 3 bits of code which will give us a complete loop. So if we run this, we're going to start from 10, check whether 10 is greater than 0, that's true, so we can run console.log I, and then we will subtract 1 from I. And then we'll keep doing this, going through these lines of bits of code here. So then once we've subtracted 1, I is going to be 9, which is still greater than 0, so we print it out. Then subtract 1 again, I is going to be 8, it's still greater than 0, we can print it out, and it will keep going until I is equal to 0, that's still greater than or equal to 0, so we print out 0. But then once we subtract 1 again, then we're left with minus 1, which is no longer greater than 0, so therefore we will stop running this loop. We're not going to print anything, we're just going to keep going with the code, and that's it. So let's run this. Awesome, so we're counting down from 10, and we stop at 0 just as we expected. So a for loop was handy here because we knew exactly when we wanted to stop and where we wanted to start. So this is where the for loop gives us a really sort of quick way to do a loop that involves the condition being a number of times that we're looping through. Okay, let's try writing one more loop together. Let's try and write a loop that counts from 0 to 10, including 0 and 10, but counting by 2, so printing out every even number from 0 to 10. It'll be similar to the loops that we just wrote, but just a different small change in the structure of the loop. So why don't you pause this video and have a go at writing that loop yourself? Cool, so hopefully you've had a go at writing that for loop. Now let's write this out together. So same structure as our previous for loop, so we always have these parentheses, these normal brackets, and then some curly brackets. So let's fill in our normal brackets. So what will be our setting up? So if we're counting from 0 to 10 and we're going up, then we're probably going to start from 0. So let's just set a variable called I to 0 as our setting up. Now for our condition. Because we want to stop looping when we've reached 10, we just only want to print up to 10, then our condition can just be I is less than 10. So our code in here, which we might just fill in now, console.log I, we're just printing out I. So this printing out, this console.log will run as long as I is less than 10. Yep, cool. So that works. However, if we want to include 10 in the numbers that we're printing out, then we should probably put an equals here. So I is less than or equal to 10. So therefore this condition will still be true if I is equal to 10, so that we still print out 10. Awesome, so we have our setting up and our condition. So now let's make the loop continue, change, move on till we reach the condition being false. And let's do that with, instead of I plus plus or I minus minus, let's do I plus equals 2. So again, this is another sort of JavaScript sort of shortcut where we can equate I to I plus 2. So this means that we start from 0, and every time we go through the loop and at the end of running this code, we're going to add 2 to I instead of just adding 1. So now we're counting by 2s, up to including 10, starting from 0. Let's see if this works. Awesome, so 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Exactly what we wanted. So yeah, for different loops that you write, you might need to change your setting up, you might need to change your condition, you might need to even change how to continue, but still, either way, for loops are a really nice, concise, simple way to write these kinds of loops. So in general, to decide when you'd want to use a for loop or when you'd want to use a while loop, generally, if you know how many times you want the loop to run, how many times you want this code here to run, you should use a for loop. However, if you want the loop to break based on a condition other than the number of times it runs, perhaps like you want to run some code as long as the weather is sunny, then a while loop is generally the way to go. So that concludes what we will be learning about loops for this course, and we'll be moving on to the next idea.